I've been kidnapped. The kidnappers called my husband, who was busy being lovey-dovey with his white moonlight, saying, "Your wife is in our hands, bring 10 million to get her back." On the other end of the line, my husband's voice was icy, "She's not worth that much, just kill her." I closed my eyes in despair. But suddenly, the kidnappers untied my ropes and respectfully handed me a cup of hot tea. "Young miss, the chairman has given orders, if your husband dares to say no, we're to deal with him on the spot, and the company will be yours to inherit." Holding the cup of hot tea, my hands still trembling, I saw the burly man, my father, bowing and scraping. The chairman said, "This is a stress test." I suddenly found it somewhat amusing. My father, the chairman of the Lin Group, a businessman who never believed in tears but only in profit and human nature, had used a meticulously planned kidnapping to tear apart the facade of warmth in my 3-year marriage. And Eric, she hadn't even passed the simplest test. "What does deal with mean?" I asked. The burly man made a throat-slitting gesture, his eyes fierce, literal disposal. The chairman said, "A heartless bastard like that is nothing but trouble if left alive." I shook my head. "No need, leave it to me. I want to watch him lose everything he's been so eager to pursue." The burly man, Tony, my father's security chief, personally drove me home. It was a riverside villa in the prime downtown area. The marital home Eric and I shared, though the deed was in my name alone. The car stopped at the gate, but I didn't get out immediately. Tony glanced at me in the rearview mirror. "Young miss, if there's anything, just say the word." "Brother Wang," I began, "who else knows about today besides you and me?" "Only a few absolutely trustworthy brothers. I'll report to the chairman personally." "All right," I nodded. "Let's pretend today never happened. I might need to trouble you again later." "Young mistress, you're too kind. It's my honor to serve you." I pushed the car door open and used my fingerprint to unlock the front door. The living room was brightly lit. My husband, Eric, was embracing a woman on the sofa. My own younger sister, MAA, was wearing my silk nightgown, her long hair cascading down, her delicate face streaked with tears like rain-soaked pear blossoms. Eric was holding her tenderly, murmuring comfort. "Don't be afraid, Xiao Yu, I'm here." The air was thick with their intimacy, a decadence I recognized but had never sensed between them before. The silk nightgown MA wore was my favorite, but now it clung to her like a glaring taunt, wrapping tightly around her triumph. The moment I stepped inside, the two of them sprang apart like cats whose tails had been stepped on. A flicker of panic crossed Eric's face, but he quickly composed himself. He stood up and walked toward me, his tone laced with reproach. "Where have you been?" "Your phone was unreachable." I looked at him. This man who had seemed to wish me dead just moments ago, now putting on the act of a worried, devoted husband. It was utterly laughable. "I had some business to take care of, so I went out for a while," I said calmly. MA also came over, carefully grabbing my arm with red-rimmed eyes. "Sis, don't blame brother Yu. He was really worried about you. You weren't answering your calls, and we were going crazy with worry. He always puts on this fragile, innocent act. No matter how serious the mistake, as long as it comes from his lips, it somehow seems excusable. It's been like this since we were kids. When he broke Mom's favorite vase, he'd cry and say, 'Sis pushed me a little. I didn't mean to.' He lost Dad's important documents and would sob, saying, 'Sister asked me to help carry her homework notebook. That's why I accidentally dropped it.' Yet Mom and Dad would always point at my nose and scold, 'You're the older sister. Can't you just give in to your younger sister?' I shook off his hand and fixed my gaze on Eric. 'Oh, you were worried about me, of course.' Eric frowned, his tone displeased. 'You didn't say a word about where you were going. Do you have any idea how worried I was?' I sneered. 'Then why did you just tell the kidnappers to kill the hostage?' My voice wasn't loud, but it exploded like thunder in the living room. Eric's face instantly turned deathly pale. 'What are you talking about?' His voice trembled. 'What kidnappers? What killing the hostage?' MIA also widened her eyes, looking innocent. 'Sister, you must have misunderstood. Brother Yu was with me the whole time.' I smiled, walked up to them, took out my phone from my bag, and pressed play. 'Your wife is in our hands. Bring 10 million to get her back. He's not worth that much. Just kill her.' Eric's cold, merciless voice echoed through every corner of the living room, his face turned from pale to ashen. Mia was also stunned, her mouth hanging open but unable to utter a single word. "Should I play it again for you?" I stared at Eric. He opened his mouth as if to defend himself, but no words came out. The recording was irrefutable evidence. "Ching-ching, let me explain," he finally managed to say. Taking a step toward me, I took a step back, avoiding his outstretched hand. "Don't touch me." His hand froze mid-air, his face showing a hurt expression. I thought it was a scam call, you know. There are so many scams these days." I raised an eyebrow. "A scam call would tell you to die." "That's not what I meant." He hastily defended himself. I panicked and said the first thing that came to mind. I looked at him as if seeing him for the first time. "Eric, we've been married for 3 years. In your eyes, am I only worth a?" said the first thing that came to mind. "No, Ching-ching, you have to believe me. I love you." He panicked and tried to hug me, before he could touch me. Mia suddenly screamed, clutching her stomach as she collapsed to the ground. "Ah, my stomach hurts so much." Eric was instantly drawn by her cries and immediately rushed to Mia's side, scooping her up in his arms, his face filled with a panic and urgency I had never seen before. "Xiao Yu, what's wrong? Don't scare me." "Brother Yu, my stomach, it hurts so bad, our baby." Mia was crying uncontrollably in his arms, her delicate face contorted in pain, looking utterly miserable. "A baby." My mind exploded with a buzz. For 2 years, I had swallowed countless bitter herbal medicines, each prenatal check filled with hope only to end in disappointment, yet he would always comfort me softly. "It's okay, Ching-ching, we're in no hurry. I love you, the baby isn't important." Those sweet words that once warmed my heart now felt like icy knives, slicing into my chest one cut at a time. Eric held Mia in her arms, barely glancing at me as she rushed out like a gust of wind. "Claire, if anything happens to Xiaoye, I'll never forgive you." Her voice pierced me like an arrow as she disappeared through the doorway without looking back. I stood alone in the empty living room, my hands and feet turning icy cold. So not only had they betrayed me, but they'd already had a child together. Meanwhile, I'd been kept in the dark like a fool. For 2 whole years, I'd endured bitter medicine just to conceive his child. He'd accompanied me to every prenatal checkup. Each time the doctor delivered disappointing news, he'd hold me tight and whisper gently, "It's all right, Ching-ching, there's no rush, I love you," with or without a child. But now looking back, all that so-called tenderness was nothing but carefully crafted lies. Those test reports had likely been tampered with by him long ago. My phone vibrated. It was a message from Tony. "Miss, we've found that Mia has registered at Renari Hospital's obstetrics department, 8 weeks pregnant." Renari Hospital, that's exactly where I've been going for my prenatal checkups, and Eric's college classmate happens to be the head of that hospital's obstetrics department. The clues instantly connected into a clear thread. I slowly walked over to the sofa and sat down. I once thought this was my home, my safe harbor, but now I realize it's nothing more than a gilded cage of hypocrisy. I picked up my phone and dialed my father's number. "Dad, it's me." From the other end of the line came my father's steady voice. "Changed your mind?" I want a divorce." I paused, my voice firm. "Also, I want back the 30% shares of Lin Group that Mom left me. But when we got married, you transferred them to Eric, saying it was to train him and help him smoothly enter the core management of the group." "Fine." Father agreed readily. "I'll have the lawyer handle it tomorrow." "Ching-ching, just wait a moment." His voice turned cold. "I'll have Tony send you the evidence of Eric and Mia's financial secrets and collusion over the years straight to your email." After a moment of silence, I spoke again. "Dad, one more thing. Eric and Mia. Neither of them will get off easy." There was silence on the other end of the line for a few seconds before Father sighed and said, "Mia is, after all, your sister. If she doesn't treat me as her sister, then I don't have a sister either." Father said nothing more, leaving only a sigh behind. Hanging up the phone, I gazed out the window at the dark river, feeling oddly calm, because I knew this battle had only just begun. The next day, I didn't go to the office. My father's legal team worked with remarkable efficiency. drafting the divorce agreement and the equity transfer agreement by morning and delivering them directly to the villa. I signed the documents, placed them on the coffee table, and quietly waited for Eric to return. He didn't appear until noon, looking exhausted with dark circles under his eyes. When he saw me sitting on the sofa, he froze for a moment before approaching, his tone softening. "Ching-ching, are you still upset? I was wrong last night. I was too impatient. How is MIA? I asked calmly, as if inquiring about the weather. He paused, then replied, "Nothing too serious. The doctor said it was just a slight disturbance to the pregnancy. She needs rest." "That's good." My calmness seemed to unsettle him, as if he hadn't expected me to be so composed. "Ching-ching, I know I was wrong. I shouldn't have treated you poorly. But Xiaoye, after all, she's carrying my child. I can't just abandon her." He spoke with such conviction, as if I were the one who had betrayed him. I looked at him, and suddenly a ridiculous sense of amusement welled up in my heart. "Eric, let's get a divorce." I pushed the agreement on the coffee table toward him. When he saw the words divorce agreement, his expression changed abruptly, and he blurted out, "I won't divorce. Ching-ching, I love you. I can't live without you. Xiaoye and I were just a momentary lapse. I swear I'll cut all ties with her. Completely and thoroughly." "What about the child in her belly?" I retorted. He froze, stammering, "I'll give her some money to have the abortion, then send her abroad. She'll never appear in our lives again." He looked as if he'd made a painful resolution, as though facing some impossible choice. I stared at his hypocritical face, feeling nothing but disgust. "No need," I said coldly. "You leave with nothing, and I'll let you and her fly off together. Leave with nothing." He let out a cold laugh, as if hearing the biggest joke. "Claire, don't forget, 30% of the company's shares are under my name now. What right do you have to make me leave with nothing?" "With this," I said, taking out my phone again to play another recording. It was Tony's voice inside. "The chairman has given orders. If the young master dares to say no, deal with him on the spot." Eric's face turned completely ashen as he collapsed onto the sofa, his eyes wide with horror as if he'd seen a ghost. You and your father planned this for me from the start." "Wrong." I looked down at him coldly, my voice icy. "You're the one who failed the test. Sign it, Eric, otherwise, I don't know what my father might do." He stared at me intently, his eyes filled with a mix of fear, resentment, and a trace of venom. In the end, trembling, he picked up the pen and signed his name on both the divorce agreement and the equity transfer agreement. After signing, he slammed the pen down on the table, his entire being seeming as though his soul had been drained. "Claire, you're truly ruthless. Compared to you wanting me dead, this hardly counts as ruthless," I replied coldly. He had no strength to argue, only staggering towards the door. At the doorway, he suddenly turned back. "You'll regret this." I ignored him until he disappeared from sight, then picked up the phone and called Tony. "Brother Wang, send someone to follow him and see where he goes." Half an hour later, Tony called back. "Miss, he went to Renari Hospital." Sure enough, he still couldn't let go of his beloved and that child. I changed my clothes and drove straight to Renari Hospital. By the time I arrived, Eric and MIA were arguing in the ward. The door wasn't fully closed, so I could clearly hear their conversation from where I stood outside. "What do you mean divorce? Leaving with nothing? Eric, have you lost your mind? Have you forgotten our original plan?" Mia's voice was shrill and vicious. What could I do? Eric was utterly exasperated. Claire's father somehow found out about us and set a trap for me. If I didn't sign, I'd lose my life. Then what about our child? What about our company? What about all the money we invested? MIA wailed. "Keep your voice down," Eric hissed. "The most important thing now is to keep Claire calm. Once the storm passes, I'll find a way to get the shares back. Take it back." "Easier said than done," MIA sneered. "Do you still think Claire is that fool you can push around? She's out to destroy us now. So tell me, what should we do?" Slap. A crisp sound of a slap rang out. Clearly, MIA had hit him. "Eric, you useless piece of trash. If it weren't for your brains helping me secure shares in the Lin Corporation, I'd never be with a social climber like you." MIA. "Don't go too far." "Me going too far? Get this straight. You've got nothing left. What makes you think you can still act tough in front of me?" I stood by the door, quietly listening to this dog-eat-dog farce, feeling utterly indifferent inside. I pushed the door open and walked in. The argument in the room came to an abrupt halt. Emie lay on the hospital bed, tears still staining her face. When she saw me, a flicker of panic flashed in her eyes. Eric covered her face, looking equally embarrassed at my presence. "Go on," I said, pulling up a chair and sitting down leisurely, watching them with amusement. "Don't let me interrupt your heartfelt exchange." Mia bit her lip and remained silent, while Eric's face turned alternately pale and flushed. "Claire, what are you doing here?" Eric asked in a low voice. "Come see my dear little sister." I emphasized the word dear heavily. "And by the way, let's hear about your grand plans. You heard everything." Mia's voice trembled slightly. "Not everything." I smiled. "Why don't you start from the beginning? Like, when did this all begin? And what's the deal with that company of yours?" They remained silent. "It's fine if you don't want to talk." I leaned back in the chair, my expression indifferent. "I have plenty of time to investigate bit by bit." I stood up and walked to Mia's hospital bed. She instinctively shrank back. "Don't be afraid." I bent down and whispered in her ear. "I won't do anything to you. After all, the child you're carrying is the Shin family's flesh and blood." I straightened up and turned to Eric. "Take good care of her. After all, she's your only hope now." With that, I turned and walked away. Once out of the hospital room, I immediately called Tony. "Brother Wang, help me look into a company. One co-founded by Eric and Mia. It should already be registered." It didn't take long for Tony to get back to me. I gave the order right away. "Contact the media. I want Eric and Mia's scandal to spread across the city within 24 hours. After hanging up the phone, I walked out of the hospital. The sunlight was glaring, and I squinted before driving straight to the company. From today onward, the Lin Group would be under my control. Back at the company, I went directly to the chairman's office. My father was practicing Tai Chi in front of the floor-to-ceiling window. When he saw me enter, he simply said calmly, "Everything's settled." I nodded. "The divorce agreement and the equity transfer agreement are both signed. Did Eric make any trouble?" "He wouldn't dare." Father smiled and poured me a cup of tea. I knew it. His all show and no substance. "Just a pretty embroidered pillow." "Dad," I stared at him. "You've known about him and Mia all along, haven't you?" Father sighed, avoiding a direct answer. "Ching-ching, you're my daughter. I'd never harm you." Someone like Eric has grand ambitions but lacks the ability to match them. Keeping him by your side would only bring trouble sooner or later. "Then why didn't you tell me earlier?" "Tell you? Would you have believed me? Back then, you nearly cut off our father-daughter relationship just to marry him." I fell silent. Indeed, at that time, I was so blinded by so-called love that I willingly fell into the gentle trap Eric had woven, refusing to listen to anyone's advice. "What about Mia? How do you plan to deal with her?" "She is your sister," my father repeated. When he harmed me, he didn't consider that I was her sister. My tone turned cold. "Dad, don't interfere in this matter. I'll handle it myself." Father stared at me for a long time, his gaze complicated, before finally nodding. "You've grown up." After leaving the chairman's office, I immediately gathered all the company's executives for an emergency meeting. At the meeting, I announced two things. First, Eric and I have divorced, and all his shares in the Lin Group under his name have been transferred back to me. Second, effective immediately, I will officially assume the position of president of the Lin Group, taking full responsibility for the company's operations and management. As soon as the news broke, the conference room erupted in chaos. Most of the senior executives were my father's old subordinates, and they naturally harbored doubts about me, the parachuted young lady. Especially Vice President Zhong Hai, my cousin from my second uncle's family, who had long coveted the position of president, President Lin. Zhong Hai spoke with a forced smile. "You've just taken over the company and aren't yet familiar with the operations. Can you really handle such a heavy burden alone?" "Whether I can handle it or not isn't for Vice President Zhong to decide," I replied calmly. "The company doesn't belong to me alone. It belongs to everyone here, with everyone's support. I believe Lin Corporation will only grow stronger." I paused, then shifted the tone. "Of course, if anyone feels I'm not up to the task or harbors ill intentions, they're welcome to resign now. I won't stop them. Lin Corporation has no room for idlers, much less traitors. My icy gaze swept across the room, and the meeting hall fell dead silent. Jong Hai's expression darkened unpredictably. I knew this was just the beginning. To truly secure my position, I had to prove my capabilities. The meeting had just adjourned when Tony's call came in. Young mistress, I've found out. That company is called Yutong Technology, registered 6 months ago. The legal representative is MIA, but the actual controlling shareholder is Eric. The company is located in the office building right across from ours, and their main business overlaps significantly with the West City Smart City project that the Lin Group is currently bidding for. I sneered inwardly. So they had planned this all along. To hollow out the Lin Group and start anew. The West City project was the most important undertaking for the Lin Group in the second half of the year, with massive investments of manpower and resources. If it were snatched away, the Lin Group would undoubtedly suffer a heavy blow. Brother Wang, I need you to do a few things for me. I lowered my voice and laid out the plan. After hanging up the phone, I looked out the window at the office building across the street, already having a plan in mind. Eric, MIA, your game is about to end. The next day, I went to work as usual. As soon as I entered the office, my assistant rushed in frantically. Director Lin, it's terrible. The core technical plan for our West City project has been leaked. Leaked? I feigned surprise. What happened? This morning, our bidding competitor, Yutong Technology, published their proposal on their official website. And it's exactly the same as ours. I immediately turned on my computer and opened their website. Sure enough, from the technical architecture to the implementation details, it was almost a pixel-perfect copy. Moreover, their release time was a full 2 hours earlier than ours. To the outside world, it now looked like we had copied them. Soon, the company's phone lines were overwhelmed. Partners, media, shareholders, all demanding answers. Internally, panic spread, and chaos ensued. Jong Hai was the first to storm into my office, full of rage, slamming a newspaper onto my desk with a loud smack. Claire, look at the mess you've made. In just a few days, you've turned the company upside down. How dare you still sit in that position? I glanced down and was shocked by the bold headline on the front page of the newspaper. Lin Group caught in plagiarism scandal, century-old reputation ruined overnight. I casually tossed the newspaper back onto the desk, my expression calm. Vice President Zhong, why so worked up? The matter hasn't been fully investigated yet, and you're already rushing to condemn me. What more is there to investigate? The evidence is irrefutable. Zhong Hai pointed at the computer screen. His face flushed with anger. Their proposal is already public, and now the entire industry is laughing at us. Is that so? I sneered. In that case, why not make this farce even bigger? I immediately called my father, asking him to use his connections to involve the police in investigating Eric for suspected commercial espionage. Before the press conference, I had already confirmed all the evidence would be ready. I promptly instructed my assistant to arrange a press conference. The moment the news broke, the entire company was thrown into chaos. Mr. Lin, have you lost your mind? Holding a press conference now is like offering your face to be slapped. Yes, President Lin, think twice. We should conduct an internal investigation first and root out the mole before taking any action. Zhong Hai was so furious he was practically jumping up and down. Claire, you're going to ruin the Lin Corporation. I ignored them and walked straight into the conference room. The press conference venue was already packed with media, the constant flashing of cameras almost blinding. I sat down at the podium, and the reporters immediately swarmed forward like sharks drawn to the scent of blood. Mr. Lin, how does your company explain the allegations of plagiarizing Leaptecher's proposal? As an industry leader, how could Lin Group stoop to such disgraceful behavior? Is it true that the insider who leaked the proposal was Mr. Eric, who has already left the company? Is this related to the breakdown of your marriage? The questions grew increasingly pointed, and the situation was nearly spiraling out of control. I raised my hand, signaling for silence. Everyone, I began, my voice amplified clearly through the microphone, filling the entire room. The reason we called this press conference today is to clarify one thing. Lin Group did not plagiarize. The room erupted in an uproar immediately. So, President Lin, are you suggesting that Yutong Technology plagiarized from you? That's right. Then may I ask what evidence you have? As far as we know, they announced it earlier than you did. Evidence? I smirked coldly. Of course there is. I pressed the page turner, and the large screen behind me instantly lit up, displaying a patent certificate. This is the patent applied for by the Lin Group 3 months ago for the core technical solution of the West City project. The patent number and application date are all listed here. Yet, Yutong Technology has been in existence for less than half a year. I scanned the room and spoke each word clearly. May I ask, how could a company established just 6 months ago independently develop a technology for which we had already filed a patent 3 months prior? The room fell silent. All the reporters stared at the screen in stunned silence, their eyes filled with shock. Seizing the moment, I continued. As for how Yutong Technology obtained our solution, I believe everyone would be even more interested to know who its actual controlling shareholder is. Mr. Eric, I paused, my voice icy. Eric was my ex-husband and a former senior executive at Lin Group. He abused his position to steal company trade secrets, colluding with his lover, Miss MIA, my own younger sister, in an attempt to hollow out Lin Group and harm the corporation's interests, my gaze sharp as a blade. I swept it across the camera. Regarding this, we have obtained conclusive evidence and have formally filed a police report. I pressed the presentation clicker again, and a video began playing on the large screen, showing Eric and MIA arguing in the hospital room. Have you forgotten our original plan? Once the heat dies down, I'll find a way to reclaim the shares. If it weren't for your brains that could help me secure the Lin family's shares, I'd never be with a social climber like you. Every word was crystal clear, the audio quality impeccable. The venue erupted instantly. Corporate warfare, marital scandal, sibling rivalry, the other woman, each element alone was enough to ignite a media firestorm. I stared at the flashing camera lights below the stage, but my heart was frozen solid. Eric, MIA. This is just the beginning. The press conference had an immediate effect, and public opinion reversed in an instant. Lin Group transformed from a plagiarist into a victim. While the official website of Yutong Tech was overwhelmed by furious netizens, its stock price plummeting nearly 30% in a single day, Eric and MIA instantly became public enemies. The police quickly intervened, taking Eric away on suspicion of commercial espionage. MIA, due to her pregnancy, was placed under residential surveillance. Soon, my mother called. She was crying so hard she could barely catch her breath, and the first thing she did was scold me. Claire, do you even have a conscience? She's your own sister. How could you treat her like this? I coldly cut her off. When she teamed up with Eric to scheme against me, did she ever stop to think I was her sister? She was just deceived by that bastard Eric and made a mistake in the heat of the moment. Why can't you forgive her just this once? I burst out laughing. Mom, do you know that when Eric told the kidnappers to kill the hostage, MIA was right by his side? Do you know that while she was pregnant, I was drinking bitter Chinese medicine for 2 years just to conceive? Do you know that the money they used to start their company was what I gave Eric to show filial piety to you? I spoke word by word, each sentence landing like a hammer blow. On the other end of the line, my mother's breathing grew increasingly rapid. Enough. Stop it, she shrieked, cutting me off. No matter what, you can't drive her to desperation. She's still carrying a child. The child is Eric's, not mine. I said coldly. She chose her own path. No one else is to blame. Claire, how could I have given birth to such a cold-blooded and heartless daughter? With those words, she hung up the phone. I held the phone, listening to the dial tone, feeling not a ripple of emotion in my heart. Cold-blooded and heartless, they were the ones who pushed me to this point, step by step. At that moment, Zhong Hai knocked and entered. Gone was his usual arrogance. Instead, he wore an awkward expression. President Lin, he hesitated for a long time before whispering. I was blind before and failed to recognize your greatness. Please don't hold it against me. I looked up and said calmly, Vice President Zhong, you're overstating it. We're all working for the company. Yes, yes, yes. He nodded hurriedly. President Lin, Your move was brilliant. Not only did it clear the company's name, but it also crushed our rivals in one fell swoop, truly masterful. I smiled without elaborating and simply instructed in a calm tone, the West City project will require your continued hard work. Rest assured, I will spare no effort and remain devoted until my dying day. After sending Zhonghai away, I leaned back in my chair, feeling a wave of exhaustion wash over me. On the surface, it seemed like I had won this battle, but deep down, I knew it was far from over. As long as MIA was still around, as long as my mother was still involved, this farce would never end. Sure enough, just a few days later, my mother stormed into the company with MIA in tow. That day, I was in the middle of chairing a crucial project meeting. Just as the discussion reached a critical point, the conference room door was flung open, and my mother barged in, followed closely by MIA, who was wearing a mask, sunglasses, and was bundled up tightly as if trying to hide her identity. "Claire, come out here right now." My mother stood at the doorway with her hands on her hips, looking every bit the image of a shrew scolding in the street. Completely devoid of the so-called noble demeanor she usually displayed, in the conference room, everyone froze, staring at the scene unfolding before them. I furrowed my brows and said, "Mom, I'm in a meeting, whatever it is. We can talk about it later, I can't wait any longer." She stormed up to me aggressively, her finger almost poking my nose. "You must come with me to the hospital today and bring your sister home." "Which home, yours or mine?" "Of course, our home. My home doesn't welcome mistresses or their bastards." My words landed like a resounding slap, striking my mother square across the face. She trembled with rage, raising her hand to hit me. I didn't dodge, but before her hand could descend, it was caught in a firm grip. My father had entered unnoticed, standing behind her with a dark expression. Had enough, not embarrassed enough already, he growled, "George, do you still have any sense of shame?" My mother angrily shook off his hand and pointed at me. "Look at the fine daughter you've raised. She disowns her own family and is driving her own sister to her death. She brought it upon herself." My father retorted without hesitation. My mother was left speechless. Trembling with rage, Emma stood beside her, shivering in fear from my father's fierce demeanor. She took off her sunglasses, revealing a face streaked with pitiful tears. "Sis, I know I was wrong. Please forgive me. I'll never dare to do it again." As she spoke, she made a move to kneel down. I let out a cold laugh and stepped aside to avoid her. "Don't, MA." I stared at her, my voice dripping with biting sarcasm. "I can't bear to hear you call me sister." She grabbed the hem of my clothes, crying even harder, pleading for mercy this once for the sake of the child. "He's still so young. He can't grow up without a father. The child not having a father is your and Eric's responsibility, not mine," I said coldly, pushing her hand away. "I'd rather you drop this pitiful act. It disgusts me, Claire." My mother screamed again. "How can you speak to your sister like that?" "Then how should I speak to her?" I retorted, staring at her. "Congratulate her on carrying my ex-husband's child. Wish them a happy union and many children. You're utterly unreasonable. The unreasonable ones are you." I finally snapped, unable to hold back any longer. One uses her daughter as a tool to seize family assets, the other uses her sister as a stepping stone to climb higher. You two are a perfect match. My father's expression grew increasingly grim. He gave a subtle signal to the bodyguards behind him, and two of them immediately stepped forward, flanking my mother and MIA. Dragging them away, his voice was icy. "From now on, they are forbidden from setting foot in the company without my permission." "George, how dare you?" my mother shrieked, struggling violently. MIA, her face pale with fear, wailed, "Dad, please, no," but no one paid them any attention, and they were quickly escorted out of the meeting room. The farce finally came to an end, and the meeting room fell so silent you could hear a pin drop. Everyone's eyes were on me, some filled with sympathy, others with awe, and a few with schadenfreude. I took a deep breath and returned to my seat. "Let's continue the meeting," I said. After expelling that mother-daughter pair from the company, life became much quieter. The West District project was secured smoothly without any competition, and the company's operations gradually stabilized. My authority within the company also grew stronger day by day. Eric's trial began soon after, charged with corporate espionage. Along with evidence I had Tony gather of his past embezzlement and bribery while in office, he was sentenced to 10 years for multiple crimes. I didn't attend the sentencing. Tony relayed the outcome to me. He said Eric kept scanning the courtroom gallery during the trial, as if searching for someone, but none of the people he hoped to see showed up. Not me, not my father, not my mother, not even MIA, abandoned by all, utterly defeated. Exactly the outcome I wanted. MIA was an accomplice and, being in the breastfeeding period, received a suspended sentence. She moved out of that villa and went back to live in the old Lynn family home with my mother. I heard she gave birth to a boy, and my mother was overjoyed, carrying her grandson around everywhere as if the child could wash away all of Mia's stains. They tried to contact me a few times, probably hoping I'd lend them a hand for the child's sake, but I ignored them every time. My father turned a blind eye to it. He no longer interfered with the mother and daughter but tacitly allowed them to stay in the old house. I knew that, deep down, he still clung to that faint thread of family affection. I didn't care. I poured all my energy into work. Under my leadership, Lynn Corporation flourished, expanding into several new business areas. I became known in the business world as the Iron Lady, decisive and ruthless. No one dared to call me Miss anymore. Everyone addressed me respectfully as President Lynn. I thought life would continue peacefully like this, until one day, I received an unexpected phone call from Eric's mother, my former mother-in-law. Ching-ching, it's Mom. A frail and timid voice came through the line. It took me a moment to realize who it was. During my 3-year marriage to Eric, I'd only met this mother-in-law once at our wedding. She was a typical rural woman, timid and quiet. Eric said she was in poor health and couldn't adjust to city life, so she stayed in their hometown. Every month, I made sure Eric sent her living expenses. We'd had almost no interaction. Is something wrong? My tone was polite but distant. Ching-ching, Mom knows Eric wronged you. He's a scoundrel. And he's gotten what he deserved. She started sobbing. But Mom begs you, for the sake of our bond as mother and daughter-in-law, please go see him. He doesn't have much time left. I frowned. What's wrong with him? He has late-stage cancer. She cried, gasping for breath. The doctor says it's just a matter of days. He wants to see you one last time. I fell silent. Honestly, I no longer felt anything for Eric. No love, no hatred, it had all dissipated after the lawsuit. Whether he lived or died, what did it have to do with me? Ching-ching, please, Mom is begging you. On the phone, he was still pleading desperately, just take pity on this old woman. All right, he's my only son. I felt somewhat irritated, but in the end, I inexplicably agreed. Send me the address. After hanging up, I told the driver to head there. The location he sent was just a small hospital on the outskirts of the city. In the hospital room, I saw Eric. He lay on the bed, gaunt and emaciated, reduced to little more than skin and bones. If not for the faintly recognizable face, I would hardly have known this was the once vibrant man. When he saw me, a glimmer of light appeared in his cloudy eyes. He struggled to sit up but lacked even the strength to lift his hand. His mother, that frail old woman, hurried over to support him. Ching-ching, you came. His voice was hoarse, like a broken beehive. I stood at the doorway without stepping further in. What did you want to see me for? He looked at me and suddenly smiled, an expression uglier than crying. I just wanted to see you again. He broke into violent coughing, as if he might cough up his lungs. His mother patted his back while tears streamed down her face. Watching this scene, I felt nothing. I've seen you. I'm leaving, I said, turning to go. Wait, he called out urgently. MIA. What happened to him? He sold the child. My steps faltered. What did you say? He thought the child was a burden. So he sold him to traffickers. Eric gasped for breath and spoke haltingly. He took that money and ran off with some pretty boy. I turned to look at him. His eyes were filled with despair and resentment. MIA, that bitch. He's not even human. For that pretty boy. He not only sold our child but also beat up my mom. How could I have been so blind back then to get involved with such a venomous woman? He'll get what's coming to him. He will. She coughed violently. each act sounding as if it were tearing pain from her lungs. My mom went to confront him, and he beat her up. She's so old. How could he lay a hand on her? Claire, she looked at me, her eyes pleading. I know I don't deserve to ask you for anything, but that child, he's also your nephew. Please help me get him back. As soon as she finished speaking, another wave of heart-wrenching coughs racked her body. I stared at her and suddenly felt that nothing in this world was more ironic than this. A woman who, for so-called love, abandoned her husband and child to elope with another man. A man who, for so-called ambition, betrayed his wife and stole the family fortune. Back then, they both claimed it was all for the child, and now that child had become trash they could casually discard. Claire, I'm begging you. She was still pleading. I looked at her and shook my head. Eric, do you still not understand? That child was doomed to tragedy from the moment he was born. And the ones who caused it are none other than you and MIA. You ruined your own lives and his. Now you want me to clean up your mess. Why should I? With that, I turned and walked away, leaving behind the sound of her mother's anguished wails. I didn't look back. Stepping out of the hospital, the sunlight was dazzling. Yet I felt an immense shadow looming over my heart, impossible to shake. I called Tony. Brother Wang, help me look into something. Tony was efficient. 3 days later, he placed the investigation results on my desk. MIA had indeed sold the child to an underground organization specializing in illegal transactions. He took the money and fled abroad with some lowlife he met at a bar. When my mom went to confront him, that thug beat her so badly she's still hospitalized. When my dad found out, he smashed everything breakable in the old house in a fit of rage. He used all his connections to freeze Mia's overseas accounts. Once the thug saw he had no money left, he dumped him without a second thought. MIA was penniless abroad, living a miserable life due to the language barrier. He wanted to return home, but because of my father's interference, he couldn't even buy a plane ticket. He called and messaged me countless times, begging me to save him, but I ignored every single one. As for the child king who was sold, Meng also found clues. The underground organization planned to sell him to a wealthy businessman in Southeast Asia for some shady purposes. The transaction was set to take place on a yacht in international waters. 3 days later, Tony asked me, "Miss, do you want to?" I shook my head and said, "Call the police." But Tony hesitated, saying he didn't care about the consequences for MIA. I cut him off. The law applies to everyone equally. MIA broke the law, and he should face legal consequences. As for the child, I paused. Though he's innocent, I owe him nothing. The best I can do is ensure he returns to a normal world instead of being traded like merchandise. Tony nodded at me and said, "I understand." 3 days later, Interpol and police from multiple countries conducted a joint operation in international waters, dismantling the underground human trafficking ring. All the abducted children were successfully rescued, including Mia's child. With no biological parents found, the child was sent to a local orphanage. Meanwhile, MIA, wanted globally by Interpol for child trafficking, awaited the full force of the law. Everything was settled. Eric passed away the day after learning the child had been found and MIA had been wanted. When he died, only his pitiful old mother was by his side. My mother spent 2 months in the hospital before being discharged. Afterward, she seemed to have aged 10 years. Her hair turned completely white, and her mind grew distant. She stopped making a fuss, spending her days staring blankly out the window. I visited her once. She held my hand and repeated, "Ching ching, I was wrong, I'm sorry." I looked at her, my heart a mix of emotions. I neither forgave her nor refused to. Some wounds, once inflicted, can never be healed. I simply told the caretaker to look after her well, then left the Lin family estate, never to return. My father seems to have come to terms with many things. He has handed over most of the company's affairs to me and has become obsessed with traveling and photography, roaming all over the world. Occasionally, he sends me some of the scenic photos he's taken, with his bold and vigorous handwriting on the back. "Ching ching, Dad is proud of you." I've carefully kept all those photos. As for me, I'm still the busy President Lin, with endless meetings to attend, documents to sign, and official duties to handle every day. But I no longer feel tired because I know everything I do is for myself, to protect the empire I've built with my own hands. On weekends, I occasionally visit the child at the welfare home. He looks very much like Eric, yet there's a faint shadow of Lingyu in his features. He is healthy and lively, and the caretakers at the welfare home adore him. I haven't told him who I am. I simply support all his living and educational expenses as an anonymous donor. I hope he can grow up healthy and happy in an environment free of hatred and conflict. As for where his life will take him in the future, that will be his own choice. Next, we'll tell you the second story. If you enjoyed it, remember to subscribe. Your support is our motivation. Let her serve the full 5-year sentence. No bail, President. The madam suffered a difficult labor and severe bleeding in prison. Should we take her to the hospital, save the child? As for her, it depends on how strong her fate is. 5 years later, Daniel walked into the hospital room carrying dinner, gazing at Lydia sitting blankly by the bedside. Worried, he said, "You should still eat something, shouldn't you?" Lydia's gaze didn't waver in the slightest, as if she had become completely detached from this world. Daniel approached with restrained emotions, attempting to pull the photo frame she was holding. Unexpectedly, the moment he touched the frame, Lydia, who had seemed utterly lost just moments before, turned her head to look at him. Though they stood merely a step apart, her eyes remained unfocused, with reddened eyes. Daniel said, "Choo-choo," but as soon as he spoke, he heard her say, "Listen, Emily is crying. She's saying, 'Mommy, it hurts so much, save me.'" Daniel clenched his fists, wanting to offer comfort, but his throat tightened with emotion. Yet Lydia only grew more distraught as she spoke, clutching the photo and curling into herself. Her face was a mask of despair as she sobbed, "But I couldn't save her. It was pitch black everywhere. I searched and searched but couldn't find Emily. I don't deserve to be a mother. It's not your fault. You need to stay strong." Just at that moment, a burst of jubilant celebratory music suddenly drifted in through the window. On the large screen opposite the hospital, a line of bold red characters scrolled past. "Heartiest congratulations on the 5th anniversary of the collaboration between the GU Group and the Wei Group. The gates of Haicheng Women's Prison opened. Lydia, after reuniting with your family, remember to stay clean and never return to this path." Moments later, a gaunt woman slowly walked out. Though her face was that of a 25-year-old, it carried the withered, lifeless weariness of an old tree. Lydia stood under the scorching sun without shedding a drop of sweat, her eyes hollow, feeling only an icy chill throughout her body. Reunion. 5 years ago when she was imprisoned, she lost all her family, and even her newborn child was taken away by her ex-husband, Marcus, alone and without family. With whom could she reunite? Dragging a worn canvas bag, Lydia staggered across the road. Just beyond the traffic light opposite the prison lay the cemetery. 1 step, 2 steps. Enduring the heart-wrenching ache, she finally reached her parents' gravestone. Though countless words swirled in her mind, they remained trapped in her throat. Only after a long while did she muster the courage to reach out and gently touch the black and white photo on the tombstone, her voice hoarse as she whispered, "Dad, Mom, I'm out." Unexpectedly, as soon as the words left her lips, a mocking voice suddenly came from behind her left. Well, if it isn't Miss Shin out of prison. It's only been 5 years, but you've aged like an old hag." Lydia froze. That uniquely caustic tone unmistakably belonged to Chris, a close friend of Marcus. She instinctively lowered her head and turned her face away, only to find someone standing to her left as well. Within her line of sight was a pair of custom-made black leather shoes, unmistakably bearing the emblem of the GU family. Lydia's face instantly turned deathly pale. The next second, a deep, unhurried voice rang out. "You really should pay your respects properly to the Shin family elders." It really was Marcus. The excruciating pain buried deep in her memory surged forth instantly. Lydia instinctively crouched down, covering her head, and pleaded in a trembling voice, "I'm sorry, Mr. GU, I was wrong. I didn't know you were here. I didn't mean to be in your way. Please, don't hit me." But then Chris sneered again. "What's gotten into you? Morching never lays a hand on women." Lydia lay prostrate on the ground, her heart filled with bitterness. Marcus indeed would not lay a hand on women. But, throughout these 5 years in prison, she was deliberately reminded every night that she was a sinner who had betrayed her husband. No one believed she had been deceived into a financial trap. She had never betrayed Marcus. Yet her explanations only invited even fiercer retaliation. Fear of Marcus. It had long been carved into her bones, though she couldn't recall when. After a long silence, an icy voice finally came from above. If you knew this would happen, why did you do it in the first place? Lydia didn't dare respond. Only after they had gone far did she slowly raise her head. The sunlight seemed to gild Marcus's silhouette with a golden edge, his entire being exuding an aloof and noble aura that was utterly captivating. Yet, after just one glance, Lydia quickly averted her gaze. Now, she dared not entertain any improper thoughts about Marcus. It took Lydia quite some time to regain enough strength to descend the mountain, but to her surprise, as soon as she turned the corner of the cemetery, she spotted a familiar Rolls-Royce. Its license plate adorned with a string of 8s. It's Marcus's car. He actually hasn't left yet. Lydia trembled and turned to retreat back into the cemetery, but with her first step backward, she thudded into a solid body. She stiffly turned her gaze and directly met Marcus's eyes. In that instant, Shin-chan felt as if an invisible hand was tightly gripping her throat, leaving her unable to breathe. The man's handsome and aloof demeanor remained unchanged from 5 years ago, his cold face devoid of excessive expression, his eyes reflecting an indifference that disregarded everything. Back then, Marcus had worn this exact same expression when he forced her to sign the divorce papers, forced her to relinquish custody and even visitation rights to their child, and in the end, he personally sent her to prison. Every cell in Lydia's body screamed at her to flee, when suddenly, a crisp voice rang out from a nearby car. "Dad, come here quick." The child's clear, crisp voice suddenly pierced Lydia's heart. With a thud, the canvas bag in her hand fell to the ground, unnoticed by her. Was it that child? The child she had given birth to but was taken away before she could even take a glance. At this moment, the longing to see her child seemed to overpower the fear in her heart. Lydia, under immense pressure, mustered her courage and pleaded with Marcus. "Mr. Gu, can I see the child? Just one glance, please." However, Marcus only responded coldly. 5 years ago, you already lost that right." A sharp pain struck Lydia's heart, but she dared not defy him. She could only watch helplessly as Marcus got into the car and drove away into the distance. But that cry of "Daddy" was seared into her mind, and she couldn't help but wonder, what would it sound like when the child called for Mommy? She wanted to see the child, even if just from afar. That would be enough for her. But the villa district where the Gu family lived was completely inaccessible to someone like her, fresh out of prison, with no other options. Lydia had to wait along the only road leading to their villa, collecting bottles to earn some money. When night fell, she would go to a nearby relief shelter and rest on a bench. After keeping watch for a week, Lydia finally saw the black Rolls-Royce again. But to her surprise, an ambulance was following closely behind it. Her heart skipped a beat, and unease surged within her. Before her rational mind could process the situation, she was already sprinting after the vehicles. Lydia memorized the name on the ambulance, but by the time she arrived at the hospital, panting and out of breath, she had no idea where Marcus and the others had gone. Frantic, she scanned the surroundings, her breathing ragged, cold sweat pouring down her pale face like rain. She grabbed a passing nurse and asked in a trembling voice, "Do you know where the person brought in by the Gu family was taken just now? You're the nanny sent by the Gu family to take care of the child, right? The child is out of danger now, in room 302, where she usually stays. Child, frequently hospitalized." These words pierced Lydia's heart with waves of sorrow. A 5-year-old child frequently hospitalized. How much pain must the child have endured during the time she was unaware, holding back tears? She arrived at room 302. The ward door was slightly ajar, and Lydia immediately spotted the frail little girl lying on the hospital bed. She quietly pushed the door open and entered. The closer she got, the more she could see the child's frailty. Even in sleep, those tiny brows were furrowed, and even the lips had turned pale. Staring at the little face that seemed carved from the same mold as her own, Lydia bit her lip hard to suppress the sob threatening to escape. She reached out, wanting to hold the child's small hand, yet she found the slender back of that hand covered in bruised needle marks, making it impossible to touch. "Baby," as if by telepathy. The sleeping child suddenly murmured, "Mommy, it hurts." In that instant, Lydia's tears could no longer be held back. Just then, footsteps echoed outside the hospital room, accompanied by a doctor's inquiry. "Mr. Gu, your daughter's leukemia has severely worsened. If we can't find a matching bone marrow soon, there's nothing more we can do." Inside the room, Lydia, who had been about to hide, froze completely. Had she heard wrong? How could it be leukemia? She was in excellent health during her pregnancy, and Marcus was also in good health. There was no family history of such conditions on either side, so why did their child have to suffer from this agonizing, life-threatening disease? Lydia looked down at the child, whose brows were tightly furrowed, and felt as if her heart were breaking. But the next moment, Marcus's words from outside the door struck her with even more devastating pain. "If we can't save her, then forget it, forget it." How can we just forget it? Overcoming fear and ignoring the pain etched into her body over the past 5 years, Lydia rushed out of the room, grabbing Marcus's arm in desperation. "Please don't give up on the child. She can be saved. She must be saved." Unexpectedly, Marcus's face darkened on the spot. "How did you find this place?" Lydia trembled but gritted her teeth, suppressing her fear as she pleaded. "I'm the child's birth mother. My bone marrow might match the child's. Please, let me try." "Okay." Yet Marcus coldly withdrew his hand, staring at her and retorting, "Do you want to save the child, or save yourself?" Without waiting for Lydia's reply, he continued expressionlessly, "Just out of prison and already setting your sights on the child. How much money are you planning to take this time?" A calm tone, sharp as the keenest blade, pierced Lydia's heart. Holding back tears, she explained with a trembling voice, "No, that's not true. She's my daughter. How could I ever harm her? With your long record of misdeeds, betraying even your own husband and parents for an outsider, what reason do we have to trust you?" Lydia's pupils contracted slightly, and she trembled uncontrollably. She had heard such words too many times over the past 5 years, even without closing her eyes. The humiliating faces would appear vividly before her, but this was the first time she had heard it directly from Marcus's own lips. The pale corridor light cast on Marcus's profile, his handsome and resolute face veiled in an icy indifference. The man's aloofness had once been the very honey that attracted her most, only now did she realize it was actually arsenic. His sharp gaze had finally convicted her of guilt. Lydia opened her mouth, but no explanation could escape her lips. She had been betrayed by her business partner. The massive funds were irrecoverable. Her parents had rushed around for her sake, only to die in a car accident on their way to plead for mercy. She was indeed guilty. No matter what Marcus does to her, she can endure it. Her dignity, her life, she's willing to give it all up. But the child is innocent. The child is only 5 years old, barely having had the chance to truly see the world, yet has been tormented by illness all this time. Since the world has already been so cruel to the child, how could parents bear to give up the chance to save her? Lydia slowly knelt down, gazing at him, lowering herself to the dust. "What must I do for you to let me save the child? Just tell me, and I'll do anything." Marcus frowned, his calm eyes flashing with a hint of darkness. The once proud and dignified Miss Shin, who had valued her dignity more than anything, had actually knelt down without hesitation. Second by second passed, and just as Lydia was on the verge of despair, Marcus finally relented. "I can let you try." Lydia's eyes lit up, but before the joy could spread, she was met with his heart-wrenching blow. "But you are not trustworthy. You must promise that you will never let Emily know you are her mother in this lifetime." She stared at Marcus, searching carefully but finding no trace of jest in his expression. On the contrary, his face held only the cold detachment of a businesslike demeanor. Not only had he deprived her of visitation rights, but now he was even severing her last remaining comfort with her daughter. A bone-chilling cold rose from the soles of her feet, gradually freezing Lydia. Tears she had held back for so long fell in large drops onto the floor, shattering into pieces, just like her broken heart, but she had no other choice. Lydia trembled as she raised her hand, choking back sobs. Word by word renouncing the last glimmer of light in her heart. I, Lydia, swear here that in this lifetime, I will never let Emily call me Mom. If I break this vow, may I be struck by lightning and die a wretched death. After saying these words, it was as if all her strength had been drained from her, and she collapsed weakly to the ground. Then, with hollow eyes, she asked, President Gu, is this enough now? Marcus glanced at the utterly broken Lydia, slightly furrowed his brow, and then instructed the arriving nurse, take her for a medical checkup. After giving his instructions, Marcus left. The ward was right across from him, just a step away, yet he didn't enter to see the child. Staring at his retreating figure, Lydia's heart turned bitterly cold. Did Marcus hate her so much? Enough to take his anger out on his own flesh and blood? No one offered an explanation. Swallowing her sorrow, Lydia went for her medical checkup. 2 hours later, before the results were even out, she heard from a nurse that Emily had already woken up. Lydia's heart leaped with joy, and she immediately headed downstairs. But just as she reached the 3rd floor, she saw her arch-rival Rachel entering her daughter's hospital room. Lydia's heart raced with urgency, and she quickly quickened her pace toward the room. However, the moment she reached the door, she heard a voice from inside call out, Mom. Lydia froze in shock. Staring in disbelief at the scene inside the room, she saw her daughter, with a face full of dependence, throw herself into Wei Qingru's embrace. In that instant, Lydia felt as if she had been struck hard on the head, the pain so intense she could barely stand. How could her own daughter call Rachel Mom? Between Marcus and Rachel, Lydia couldn't bear to think further. Even though things had come to this, even though her love for Marcus had turned to nothing but fear, the thought of him embracing another woman and doing the intimate things they once did together, it made her struggle to breathe. Mommy, I've been very good today. In the hospital room, the childish voice rang out repeatedly, like strong liquor poured over heart wounds, burning and painful. Lydia pressed a hand to her chest, closed her eyes, and turned around, intending to lean against the wall to steady herself. But the moment she turned, she heard a cold accusation from nearby. Breaking your vow right after swearing it. You've got quite the nerve. Lydia froze, her gaze locking with Marcus's indifferent stare. It was like a sudden frost had descended, chilling the air so much that she shivered, just as she instinctively opened her mouth to explain and plead for mercy. The doctor following behind Marcus exclaimed with delight, Ms. Shin, your bone marrow is a perfect match for Miss Emily. We can schedule the surgery soon, really. Like clouds parting to reveal the blazing sun, Lydia could think of nothing else. She rushed forward to take the report from the doctor's hands, her eyes fixed on the words HLA full match. Tears instantly welled up in her eyes. A perfect match. This is wonderful. Lydia murmured the words over and over, clutching the report as she alternated between tears and laughter. Her daughter is saved. Excited. Lydia inadvertently glanced at Marcus's expression and was surprised to see not a trace of joy on his face. Her heart skipped a beat, and she quickly composed herself before nervously looking at Marcus again. A bitter taste rose in her throat. She knew all too well that she had no right to pry into his personal affairs. But with her daughter right in front of her, she couldn't suppress her longing. Mr. Gu, may I go in and talk to Emily? Worried he might refuse, Lydia hastily added. I won't reveal my identity. I'll just greet her as a fellow patient. Marcus only said coldly, you should leave now. Though brief, the words were full of threat. The light in Lydia's eyes dimmed little by little. In the end, she could only hold back her tears, lower her gaze, and reply, okay. On her way out, Lydia couldn't stop replaying the scene in her mind. Her daughter looking up at Rachel, calling her mom with adoration. Before she knew it, she had wandered to the small playground in the hospital's inpatient ward. Lydia slowly crouched beside the massive banyan tree roots, her thoughts drifting back to 5 years ago. Mo Ching, are you looking forward to our baby calling you daddy? Do you think our child will say daddy or mommy first when they grow up? That doesn't matter. Back then, she would feel wronged by his indifference. resentful that he didn't seem to care at all about their child. But only now did she realize that cruelty is 100 times more merciless than indifference. After sending her to prison, he turned around and married another woman, letting his child call someone else mom. The more she thought about it, the more torment she felt. At that moment, a sharp taunt pierced the air. "Lydia, still lingering here? What, do you really think your old hag appearance can still captivate Mo Ching?" Lydia looked up, and her gaze froze when it landed on the antique jade bracelet on Rachel's wrist. That was the heirloom bracelet passed down through the generations of the Gu family to their daughters-in-law. Marcus had refused to give it to her back then, yet now it adorned Rachel's wrist. The next second, she heard Rachel boast, "As you can see, Marcus and I are married, and we even have a 5-year-old son." With a thunderous crash, Shin-chan's world seemed to collapse. 5 years old. That would make him the same age as Emily. She clenched her fists tightly, her shattered heart radiating intense pain. So, while he was still married to me, he was already involved with Rachel. No wonder he was so cold to me after marriage, and no wonder he sent me to prison without hesitation. Now he won't let me see our daughter. Is that also for Rachel's sake? As I was thinking this, Rachel arrogantly declared her dominance again. "Our family of 3 is very happy now. If you know what's good for you, stay far away." A family of 3, Lydia stared at Rachel's smug expression, thinking of her daughter's attachment to Rachel. Her chest ached so much that every breath felt like a knife cutting through her. "What about Shoro-jie? She clearly calls you mommy too." Rachel let out a mocking laugh and said indifferently, "She's just a walking blood bank." "Did you really think the Gu family raised her to be their young miss?" Lydia's face turned deathly pale. What blood bank? What had the Gu family done to Emily behind her back? Amidst the heartache, she seemed to hear a demon's whisper. "Do you know how your daughter got sick? She did it for my son, month after month, slowly draining her life away with leukemia." With a sudden boom, a dull thunderclap echoed across the clear sky, followed by a torrential downpour. Lydia didn't even know when Rachel had left. Standing in the rain, she felt as if the thunderbolts were crashing directly upon her head. Every vein tearing and bleeding, the pain so intense it made her soul tremble. Emily, her poor daughter, in places unknown to her, such a young child had endured such heartbreaking grievances, and she had been completely unaware of it all. Lydia stumbled toward the hospital ward, her face drenched in indistinguishable tears and rain. Along the way, the cold indifference of Marcus and the mockery of Rachel weighed on her heart like a mountain, making it hard to breathe. Upon reaching the 3rd floor, Lydia spotted her daughter from across the corridor, standing by the door with a cup of water in her hands, her little face filled with eager anticipation. Lydia's tears fell even more fiercely. She walked toward the child, one step, then another. The closer she got, the more she longed to embrace that tiny body and whisper in her ear, "Sweetheart, I'm your mommy." But she didn't dare take the risk. She had nothing left, nothing but her own life, and no way to stand against Marcus. She couldn't let her daughter lose the chance for treatment. Lydia finally came to a stop about a meter away from the child, forcing back her tears as she gazed at the small figure before her with restrained heartache. Unexpectedly, when the child looked over, she took the initiative to speak. "Auntie, why are you crying? Does something hurt? Should I call the doctor uncle for you?" With a sudden jolt, Lydia's composure shattered completely. Her daughter's first words to her were actually words of concern. Her precious one had grown into such a kind-hearted soul. Lydia squatted down to meet the child's eye level, holding back tears as she shook her head with a choked voice. "It doesn't hurt. I just feel heartbroken for you, my daughter." But these words lingered on the tip of her tongue. Lydia opened her mouth several times, yet nothing came out. Instead, her tears flowed more fiercely, unstoppable no matter how hard she tried. Then, the child suddenly ran past her with an eager expression, calling out joyfully, "Daddy." Lydia froze, then slowly stood and turned around, only to see her daughter struggling to lift a cup of water toward Marcus, beaming with eager delight. "Daddy, you work so hard. I specially poured you some hot water." Yet, Marcus actually took a step back, avoiding the child's hand. In that instant, Lydia felt as if she had plunged into an icy abyss. Marcus's indifference toward their daughter was so extreme that she simply couldn't convince herself this was how an ordinary father would interact with his child. Rachel's malicious words seemed to echo in her ears once more, just a walking blood bank. At this moment, Lydia couldn't ignore the grievance on her daughter's face. In this world, she might be the only one who genuinely wished her daughter well. She had to do something for her daughter. Suppressing her instinctive fear, Lydia met Marcus's gaze and walked toward him. "President Gu, I have something to say to you." Marcus neither nodded nor shook his head, merely glancing at his assistant beside him, signaling to take the child into the hospital room. The empty corridor soon had only the two of them left. At this moment, Marcus coldly remarked, "Do you think it's appropriate to talk to me dressed like this?" Lydia lowered her head and only then noticed that her dress was soaked by the rain, now clinging to her body, making the clothes underneath clearly visible. In the past, she might have been too embarrassed to face anyone. But at this moment, even if the sky were to collapse, nothing was more important than her daughter. Moreover, something as luxurious as dignity. She had stopped hoping for it from the very first day she was imprisoned. Lydia raised her head calmly, staring at Marcus as she spoke word by word. "Mr. Gu, I know you hate me, but Emily is your own flesh and blood. I don't expect you to cherish her like a pearl, but I hope you won't lose the conscience of a father." Marcus's usually indifferent expression actually showed a rare frown, but Lydia no longer had the energy to analyze what his micro-expressions meant. Changing the subject, her eyes filled with determination. "I've lost everything, but if anything happens to Emily, I'll fight with my life to get justice for her." With that, Lydia voluntarily left the third floor. Behind her, she faintly sensed that cold gaze, but this time, she walked away with her back straight, never looking back. But Lydia didn't leave the hospital. After changing into dry clothes, she continued to stay and keep watch at the hospital. For some reason, ever since meeting Rachel, her heart had been uneasy, as if something bad was about to happen. As night fell, Shin-chan fell asleep in the vacant infusion room. Half asleep and half dreaming, she was suddenly awakened by a piercing alarm, followed by the urgent shouts of an emergency nurse. "Patient Emily in room 302 is bleeding and unconscious, in critical condition. The blood bank is running low. We urgently need Rh-negative type A blood." Lydia was shocked. Without even putting on her shoes, she rushed toward room 302, but just as she reached the corner near the ward, two tall bodyguards suddenly appeared, covering her mouth and dragging her into the dark stairwell. What are you doing?" Lydia struggled, her heart burning with anxiety. At this moment, in the shadows of the stairwell, Rachel held a sharp dagger, staring at Lydia with a cold smile, leisurely issuing her command. "Want to save your daughter? Then go die. As long as you're dead, I promise your daughter will be just fine." Lydia fixed her gaze on Rachel standing on the steps. The malice in the other woman's eyes was no different from those who had tormented her in prison. Such a person, whose heart seems soaked in venom, how could they truly mean what they say? What they truly desire is to forge their joy from her suffering. Lydia suppressed her urgency, ceased struggling, and feigned resignation with dimmed eyes. "If I die, will you really spare Emily?" Rachel lifted her chin slightly, speaking as if bestowing a favor. "My son's illness is already cured. As long as you're willing to die in your daughter's place, I promise your daughter will grow up healthy." Lydia lowered her head, appearing to be deep in thought, but her peripheral vision was gauging the distance between herself and the stairwell door. A few seconds later, she finally said, "All right." Rachel's eyes flashed with triumph, as if afraid Lydia might change her mind, and she immediately handed over the dagger in her hand. Lydia took the dagger and gripped it tightly, then subtly glanced at the two bodyguards. They seemed to have been fooled by her acting as well. As they both visibly relaxed, seizing the opportunity, she took a step back and immediately ran away. After rushing out of the stairwell, she desperately fled toward the bright and crowded areas, while behind her, Rachel's furious and frantic curses faintly echoed. "Hurry up and chase her." Lydia quickly picked up her pace again and, in the chaos, accidentally collided with a doctor at a corner. The pursuing bodyguards, not wanting to escalate the situation, retreated, with the crisis averted. Lydia was catching her breath and about to express her gratitude when she first heard a clear, delighted voice. "Choo-choo, it's you." Looking up, she realized it was her old friend, Daniel. But this GU who couldn't spare time for reminiscing, tugging at the other person's arm with tears in her eyes, she pleaded, "Can you take me to the emergency room? My daughter is bleeding and unconscious. I must get there immediately to save her." Daniel's expression changed instantly. "Follow me." The emergency room was on the first floor. Every second as they rushed there, Lydia was trembling. Seeing this, Daniel didn't dare to ask anything else. Only taking the dagger from her hand and handing it to a passing nurse to keep safe, the two hurried to the first floor, only to be stopped by a nurse in the hallway outside the emergency room. Lydia urgently said, "I'm Rh-negative type A blood. I'm here to save someone." "No need, we already have sufficient blood supply here." Lydia froze mid-sentence. Did having a blood source mean her daughter was saved? The tension that had gripped her suddenly eased, and her legs went so weak she could barely stand. Fortunately, Daniel beside her caught her in time, making it look to outsiders as if the two were intimately embracing. Just at that moment, a tall and upright figure emerged from the direction of the operating room. Marcus's face was initially expressionless, but when his gaze fell upon the embracing pair across from him, his eyes instantly turned cold. Daniel again, Lydia's so-called best friend, who supposedly couldn't bear to be apart from her for even a moment. The temperature in the air seemed to drop several degrees abruptly. Lydia's heart was entirely focused on her daughter, completely unaware of these details. She just rushed forward and asked, "How is Emily? Can I go see her?" Marcus brushed past her coldly without even a glance. Daniel, standing nearby, couldn't bear it any longer and stepped forward, saying, "President GU, preventing a mother from seeing her child goes against basic humanity, don't you think?" Marcus paused mid-step, turned his head, and cast a frigid glance at Lydia before ruthlessly replying, "My daughter doesn't need a mother who was busy being affectionate outside her operating room." With that, he strode away. Lydia's face instantly turned deathly pale. She understood that if she didn't explain things clearly to Marcus this time, she might never get to see her daughter again in this lifetime. She hurriedly chased after Marcus, catching up with him just as he reached the parking lot, blocking his path to the car. She gasped breathlessly to explain, "You've misunderstood. Xiaomin only brought me to the emergency room. We're just friends." Yet somehow, these words seemed to provoke Marcus's anger. His expression instantly turned icy and severe as he finished speaking, pinning Lydia against the car door with a cold, demanding tone. "He took you to the emergency room, and you just let him hold you. Lydia, am I really that easy to fool, or is it that as long as your conditions are met, you'll do anything?" The air seemed to freeze, the world narrowing to the chilling fury radiating from Marcus. Lydia widened her eyes, staring at the man so close to her. Since their reunion, this was the first time Marcus had expressed his disgust for her so bluntly. She opened her mouth, but not a single word could escape. He didn't believe her explanation. In his eyes, did everything she do have ulterior motives? Her eyes trembled as 2 lines of tears slid down her cheeks. Lydia asked with bitter despair, "Marcus, what will it take for you to believe me? Just because you don't love me, does that mean everything I do is wrong?" Marcus's gaze remained unchanged, still as deep and unfathomable as ever, but the hand pressing against her waist suddenly tightened. He said coldly, "Are you questioning me?" Under his oppressive aura, Lydia trembled uncontrollably, feeling like a mere drop in the vast ocean, utterly incapable of standing against him head-on, suppressing the pain in her heart. She looked up at him and whispered timidly, "No, I'm begging you. Please let me see our daughter." "Okay," yet her submission still failed to soften Marcus's stance. On the contrary, his dark, gleaming eyes seemed to flicker with a flame, neither fully anger nor not, like icy fire suddenly rising from a snow-capped peak, threatening to consume Lydia. Lydia instinctively leaned back, but with the car door behind her, there was nowhere left to retreat. At this moment, Marcus, contrary to his previous aloofness, leaned an inch closer to her and said, "As you've admitted yourself, you have nothing left. What could you possibly offer to beg me?" Lydia's eyes flickered with pain as she faintly discerned the implication in his words. She was somewhat incredulous. How could the usually cold and abstinent Marcus make such a demand? Yet after speaking, Marcus remained motionless, as if waiting for her response. Enduring the humiliation, Lydia slowly raised her hand, tentatively hooking it around Marcus's neck. Surprisingly, he didn't push her away, so even the noble Marcus was no different from others, merely treating her as an amusing plaything. In that moment, the last remnants of love in her heart died completely. Lydia stood on tiptoe, closed her eyes, and kissed Marcus's lips, tasting the bitterness of her own tears. The irony was that Marcus's lips were actually burning hot. Pushed into the car, conquered and plundered. Lydia didn't know how she was brought to the apartment near the hospital by Marcus. By the time she regained a sliver of clarity, she was already pinned down by him on the round bed. Marcus's movements were nothing short of savage, a stark contrast to his usual cold and detached demeanor. The relentless impacts made it impossible for Lydia to suppress the sobs escaping her lips. The floor-to-ceiling window opposite reflected her disheveled and humiliated figure in various contorted positions. From late night until dawn, the absurdity knew no bounds. The next morning, Lydia finally got her wish to enter the hospital room. She brought carefully prepared soup and visited her daughter under the guise of being Marcus's friend. Emily was very well behaved, sipping her soup while saying, "Auntie, thank you for the soup. I really like it." Her obedient demeanor melted Lydia's heart. Holding back tears, she gently replied, "If you like it, I'll make it for you again tonight, okay?" The child looked up with a bright smile and said, "Thank you, Auntie, your soup is amazing." All the pain in Emily's body has flown away. In that instant, Shin-chan Story could no longer hold back. She urgently yet carefully pulled her daughter into a tight embrace, tears streaming down her face in the direction the child couldn't see. After calming down for a while, she suppressed her sobs and said softly, "Auntie will hug you, and it won't hurt anymore." However, what reached her ears was Xiao Jie's disappointed words, "Auntie, I wish you were my mom. My mom never likes to hug me." Lydia's heart seemed to bleed, but all she could do was hold the child's small body, silently repeating "I'm sorry" over and over again. The mother and daughter comforted each other, neither noticing the fleeting figure outside the hospital room. In the end, Lydia made plans with her daughter to bring over soup for dinner as well. After leaving the hospital, she returned to the apartment and stayed busy for most of the afternoon. Just as she was about to leave, while tidying up the kitchen, she accidentally cut herself on the knife's edge, and bright red blood immediately gushed out. The pain shot straight to her heart, sending a jolt through her, and an uneasy premonition arose within her. This unease lingered, even as she rushed back to the hospital, refusing to fade. Not only did it not dissipate, but the closer she got to Ward 302, the stronger that uneasy feeling grew. After exiting the elevator, she instinctively quickened her pace, breaking into a run. Yet, just as she reached the ward door, she heard the shattering words, "The patient died from massive hemorrhage due to vascular rupture. The deceased's name, Emily." Bang! The soup container in Lydia's hands crashed to the floor. She stumbled into the room, only to see the nurse pulling a white sheet, about to cover the child's tiny body. Lydia stared fixedly at the form beneath the sheet, completely shattered. "No." Lydia staggered through the door. "Don't give up on my child." She collapsed onto the hospital bed, shielding the child with her own body, and turned to beg the doctors through tears, "Please, save her. She must still have a chance. As if as long as that white cloth doesn't cover the child, there's still hope." Yet none of the doctors surrounding half the ward responded. Lydia's heart sank bit by bit into the depths of the sea, bitterness gradually submerging her. She gasped for air, yet not a single breath of oxygen reached her chest. She slowly withdrew her gaze, her trembling hand reaching out to caress the child's pale cheek, murmuring, "Why won't you believe me? She's just asleep. She's still waiting to drink the soup I made. She said my soup could make her pain fly away." Lydia held the child tightly in her arms, her eyes as hollow as a soulless shell. Lost in a self-deceptive fantasy, "Emily, you sleep first. When you wake up, we'll eat together and play together. From now on, I'll accompany you to any place you want to go. By the end, Lydia's lips were still moving, but not a single syllable could escape. The hospital room was so quiet it seemed you could hear the sound of tears shattering. The doctor couldn't bear to watch any longer and spoke up to console her. "Madam, Emily has already passed. Please accept our condolences." The moment the words "accept our condolences" were spoken, it seemed to shatter Lydia's last shred of hope. Pressing her face against the child's cold cheek, she let out a heart-wrenching cry. "Emily, it's Mommy. Mommy's holding you. Won't you open your eyes and look at me? There hasn't been a single moment when I stopped loving you, nor have I ever abandoned you." Lydia held the child tightly, her heart breaking until bloody tears streamed from her eyes. "I'm sorry, my baby, I'm sorry." No matter how much Lydia apologized, the little body in her arms never opened its eyes again. In this lifetime, she would truly never hear the word mommy. The day after the child's death, Marcus still hadn't appeared, and not a single person from the GU family came. It was just as Rachel had said. The GU family had raised this daughter solely to save another child. They didn't care at all whether Emily lived or died. Finally, with Daniel's help, Lydia obtained the necessary documents and, as the mother, collected the child's belongings and arranged the burial. After leaving the cemetery, once in the car, Daniel turned to ask Lydia, who was sitting in the passenger seat, "What are your plans now?" Lydia shook her head with a distant gaze, having never given thought to the future. At that moment, she was holding a stack of drawings, gently tracing her fingers over them. These were the belongings the hospital had gathered. Looking at the childish strokes on the drawing paper and the words Mom, Dad, and me written on it, Lydia's throat tightened once more. She pulled out the drawing, closed her eyes to calm herself for a moment, then opened them to continue flipping through. Unexpectedly, the next sheet turned out to be a surgical consent form. The date was recent. Daniel, standing nearby, let out a puzzled before saying, "Isn't this a stem cell extraction notice?" Xiao Jie's condition makes her completely ineligible for this procedure. Lydia suddenly felt a chill run down her spine, her face turning pale as she asked, "What would happen if it were forcibly done?" "Xiao Jie has leukemia. She's already lacking stem cells. Forcibly extracting them would be like taking away the firewood from under a boiling pot, causing systemic chaos in her body and even massive hemorrhaging." With a thunderous realization, Lydia's mind went blank as a terrifying thought surfaced. Xiao Jie was murdered. Who was it? Rachel. Her hands trembled as she continued flipping through the pages, only to see 3 bold, forceful characters. Marcus, where the family signature should have been, if darkness had layers. Lydia was now trapped in the 18th, where no light could ever penetrate. She returned to the hospital, clutching her daughter's black and white photo, and stayed in Ward 302 from dawn till dusk. Neither eating nor drinking, completely numb and disoriented, Daniel walked into the hospital room carrying dinner, gazing at Lydia sitting blankly by the bedside. "Worried," he said, "you should still eat something, shouldn't you?" Lydia's gaze didn't waver in the slightest. As if she had become completely detached from this world, Daniel approached with restrained emotions. Attempting to pull the photo frame she was holding, unexpectedly, the moment he touched the frame, Lydia, who had seemed utterly lost just moments before, turned her head to look at him. Though they stood merely a step apart, her eyes remained unfocused. With reddened eyes, Daniel said, "Choo-choo." As soon as I opened my mouth, I heard her say, "Listen, Emily is crying. She's saying, 'Mommy, it hurts so much. Save me.'" Daniel clenched his fists, wanting to offer comfort, but his throat tightened. But Lydia only grew more distraught. Clutching the photo and curling up, she sobbed in despair. "But I can't save her. It's pitch black everywhere. I can't find Emily no matter how hard I try. I don't deserve to be a mother. It's not your fault. Pull yourself together." At this very moment, a burst of jubilant celebratory singing suddenly came from outside the window. On the large screen opposite the hospital, a line of bold red text scrolled by. "Heartiest congratulations on the 5th anniversary of the collaboration between the GU group and the Wei group." Suddenly, Lydia let out a wah and vomited a mouthful of blood in fury. She stared fixedly at the large screen, her eyes gradually filling with intense hatred. "Marcus, Rachel. Her little Jez body is barely cold. How can such a cruel child killer live freely and happily? She is filled with hatred. 3 days later, Haicheng Airport, returning from a business trip. Marcus had just stepped out of the airport when he ordered, first, to the hospital. The assistant who came to pick him up paled, sweating nervously as he changed the subject. The old master said today marks the 5th anniversary of the GUE collaboration banquet by the river. He insists you must attend. Before Marcus could respond, his friend Chris walked over from the airport exit, yawning and remarking, 5 years already. And your grandfather still hasn't given up on pushing you and Rachel together. Why not just marry her? Marcus replied coldly, I have no interest in bigamy. Chris clicked his tongue, I really don't get what you're after. If you already signed the divorce papers with Lydia back then, why tear them up? And if you want Lydia, why haven't you reached out to her since she got out of prison? A shadow flickered in Marcus's eyes as he replied calmly, I have my own plans. What kind of plan takes 5 years? Your grandfather is making Emily call Rachel mom, and you're not stopping it. Do you know people outside are spreading rumors that the 5-year-old boy raised by the Wei family is your illegitimate child with Rachel? If I didn't know you've never touched Rachel, I'd believe it too. At this, Marcus finally shot his friend a cold glare. Shut up. Hey, I've been working myself to the bone to make money for you. Can't I even ask out of curiosity, by the way? You crammed half a month's work into 5 days. Who are you in such a hurry to come back and see? This time, Marcus didn't answer, only staring into the void with a dimmed gaze, as if looking at someone. For the first time in 5 years, he felt an overwhelming urge to rush home. But in the end, Marcus suppressed his personal emotions and ordered his assistant, head to the business banquet. A little while later, Marcus arrived at the open-air business banquet. The originally spacious venue had been transformed into a dazzling spectacle, with the wealthy and powerful of Haicheng in attendance, along with numerous reporters. Rachel, who had been surrounded by a crowd, immediately approached upon seeing Marcus. She familiarly linked her arm with his and asked with a smile, Morching, everyone's been waiting for you. Marcus coldly withdrew his hand and replied indifferently, Miss Wei, please maintain your dignity, we are not that close. Rachel's expression stiffened momentarily, but since their conversation was quiet and unheard by others, she quickly regained her composure. Pretending not to notice Marcus's aloofness, she said gently, Grandpa Gu was just talking about you earlier, why don't you go see him? Marcus slightly furrowed his brows but still walked over. A hint of triumph flashed secretly in Rachel's eyes, thinking about the upcoming announcement of the GUE family alliance by Grandpa Gu. She couldn't contain her excitement. She had schemed for 5 years and finally waited for this day. Now that Emily was dead and Lydia was no longer a threat, the position of Mrs. Gu was hers for sure. At that very moment, the festive music playing through the speakers suddenly stopped, and in the next second, a mournful tune typically heard at funerals began to play. The cheerful crowd instantly fell silent. Marcus's footsteps halted abruptly. Then, the music stopped again. And a mocking voice came through the speakers, what a grand celebration this is. His brow twitched as Marcus recognized Lydia's voice. Yet, scanning the room, he couldn't spot Lydia anywhere. In an instant, a surge of unease arose. Then, the speakers delivered another question, nearly gritted through teeth. Marcus, Rachel, how heartless you are. To save your own son, you treated my daughter as a mobile blood bank, draining her until she developed leukemia. Yet even then, you wouldn't let her go. You knew Emily had leukemia, yet you still extracted her stem cells, causing her to bleed to death, and now you dare to hold a banquet to celebrate. Do you truly fear no divine retribution? As these words rang out, the entire room was struck with shock. Rachel's face suddenly turned pale. Her first thought was that Marcus must never learn the truth. The banquet today must not be ruined. She stepped forward urgently, explaining, Morching, don't listen to her nonsense. You know Emily's condition is congenital. It has nothing to do with us. Lydia must be desperate now that she can't cling to you anymore. However, Marcus pushed her away without hesitation. He knew all too well that Lydia would never lie about their daughter's life. But as he climbed onto the high platform and looked around, he still couldn't see Lydia. His composure began to crack. Lydia, Where are you?" The quiet venue echoed with Marcus's shouts. No one answered, unable to find her. Marcus felt the situation spiraling out of control. He tried to soften his tone, pleading, "Lydia, come out first. Let's talk this through properly." He had no connection whatsoever to Rachel, nor had he ever posed any threat to Shorojie. At this moment, a cold laugh came from the speakers, followed by Lydia's voice filled with resentment. "Talk nicely. Do you think I would still believe you, Marcus? I truly regret ever meeting you." Gradually, her voice seemed to be tinged with heart-wrenching pain. "Emily loved you with all her heart, calling you dad and mom so sweetly. What kind of feelings were you holding that made you ignore her cries of pain again and again? Your son is precious, but isn't Emily my precious too, but the child I longed for with all my heart? Until death, I never got to hear her call me mom." The sound of sobbing, amplified by the speakers, reached every guest's ears clearly. Nearly all the female attendees had reddened eyes, and Marcus's composure shattered completely in that moment. Then came Lydia's resolute words, "Marcus, I told you, if anything happens to Emily, I'll stake my life to seek justice for her." Marcus's heart suddenly felt hollow, his unease violently surging. "Lydia, don't do anything reckless, foolish things. The most foolish thing I've ever done in my life was placing expectations and love on someone like you." Then, a heart-wrenching sob echoed from the speakers. "I, Lydia, swear here today, I will use my very life to curse the Gu and Wei families to turn on each other, to end their bloodlines. I curse your wicked deeds to be exposed to the world, and I curse you, Marcus, to lose all you love and die alone." Each word pierced Marcus's heart like a sharp blade. The pain so intense he staggered back a step. The next moment, Lydia's voice, as if drained of all strength, whispered faintly, "Shorojie, Mommy is coming to be with you. From now on, I'll hold you tight and never let you hurt again." As soon as the words were spoken, a scream of alarm came from the guests ahead. "Ah!" Someone jumped off the building. Marcus looked up and saw a white figure plummeting from the high-rise directly in front of him, with a loud thud. It crashed heavily onto the white curtain just a few steps away. Blood instantly soaked through the white curtain, as well as the black and white photo Lydia had clutched tightly in her hand until her last breath. The terrified screams of the guests rose and fell, yet the world fell silent before Marcus. He frantically rushed toward Lydia lying in the pool of blood. The man who had always been calm and composed, who wouldn't flinch even if the sky collapsed, was now trembling uncontrollably. One step, two steps, finally, he reached Lydia, only to find that despite nearly bleeding dry, her eyes were still open. Marcus dropped to one knee, bending down to lift her, but as soon as he reached out, a sudden punch struck him from the side. "Marcus, you've finally succeeded in killing Choo-Choo. Are you satisfied now?" The person who arrived was Daniel. At this moment, his eyes were red, filled with pain, and upon closer inspection, there was also regret. When Lydia asked him to help sneak into the banquet, he should have refused, but she said she needed to settle things with Marcus first. To this day, he still remembers the look of utter despair in her eyes when she made her request, unable to refuse. He brought her in and used his connections to arrange the sound system as she had asked. He thought she genuinely wanted to say something in front of everyone, to reach some kind of resolution with Marcus, but who would have thought she would die? Daniel hated himself for being careless, but Marcus, who caused all this? Marcus didn't dodge the punch, yet it did nothing to lessen his fury. "Marcus, Choo-Choo's death will never be the end. For the crimes your Gu and Wei families committed against Choo-Choo and her mother, I will make sure every single one is repaid." Yet, Marcus remained unresponsive for a long time. His gaze was fixed on Shin-chan lying in the pool of blood from start to finish, not even caring about the blood trickling from the corner of his mouth, until Daniel stepped forward to take Lydia away. At this moment, Marcus looked up and coldly snarled, "Get lost." That cold, crimson gaze even frightened Chris, who had stepped forward to mediate, while the other guests retreated several steps. The area around Marcus, already empty, now became even more deserted. If Daniel had feared Marcus, he wouldn't have come to snatch her away, but at this moment, he didn't want to fight with Marcus. Marcus was indeed despicable, But he couldn't let Lydia remain lying in such a humiliating state under everyone's gaze. He said coldly, "Marcus, if you have even a shred of humanity left, you shouldn't let Choo-Choo lie here like this, making her endure humiliation even after death." Marcus's face suddenly paled, but the possessiveness in his eyes did not diminish in the slightest as he stubbornly insisted, "I will take her to where she belongs. Kochu hated you to the core, she would never go with you. Are you not satisfied with ruining her life? Must you also destroy her afterlife to make her die with everlasting regret?" The words pierced Marcus's heart like sharp blades, pressing his lips together. It took him a long while to squeeze out a sentence, "She is my wife." As he spoke, he hastily bent down, trying to close Lydia's eyes. The first attempt failed. Marcus's hand trembled slightly. He thought it must be because he hadn't applied enough force, so he reached out to stroke once more. Yet this time, her eyes still did not close. Instead, he felt even more clearly that the skin beneath his hand had turned cold. "Enough. How long do you intend to humiliate her before you're satisfied?" Daniel stepped forward, blocking Marcus from reaching out again. Then, he raised his own hand and gently touched Lydia's eyes, enduring the pain as he said, "Don't worry. I will seek justice for you and Emily, and I will bury you beside Emily." As his words fell, his hand moved down, and miraculously, Lydia's eyes closed. Marcus stood frozen in place, unable to recover for a moment, but just as Daniel was about to embrace her, he once again shielded Lydia with an absolute stance, then swiftly yet carefully picked her up. Daniel glared in fury, but upon seeing the dark red bloodstains, he suppressed the urge to snatch her away. The figure gradually walked away into the distance. After Marcus left, the guests at the banquet began to take their leave one by one. With a death occurring at the banquet, it naturally couldn't continue. Moreover, the accusations Lydia made during the event were too shocking. Soon, the once lively open-air banquet hall was left with only the Wei family members and the Jiu family members. Except for Marcus, Old Master Gooseface was livid, and it took 2 emergency heart pills for him to recover. Meanwhile, Rachel, who had lost all her earlier arrogance, stood pale-faced beside her parents. The group returned to the meeting room to rest and discuss the next steps. Father Wei probed Old Master Jiu with a leading question. "Master Jiu, apart from this matter, what about the marriage between our Qianru and Morqing?" Old Master Jiu chuckled lightly. "The collaboration between the Jiu and Wei families has always been pleasant. This banquet won't affect our future cooperation. In families like ours, marriages are traditionally arranged by matchmakers. I'll talk to Morqing about it." Father Wei sighed in relief, and Rachel's face brightened, though she still looked uneasy as she said, "Lydia revealed the child's existence before she died. I'm afraid he might investigate further. Grandpa Jiu, you must help me. This matter was done with your permission back then. I don't want Morqing to misunderstand me." "Qianru, watch your tone." Father Wei pretended to scold, then quickly changed his tune, adding, "Grandfather Jiu can naturally arrange such matters properly. Why would you need to worry about it?" The tactic of retreating to advance indeed coaxed Old Man Jiu into making a promise. "Extracting Emily's bone marrow was indeed approved by me. Trading a daughter for a son. There's nothing wrong with that." At this point, a mocking laugh suddenly came from the Jiu family crowd, followed by a somewhat disheveled middle-aged man standing up. "After all these years, your preference for sons over daughters still hasn't changed. If my elder brother and sister-in-law knew how you treated their granddaughter from beyond the grave, their coffins wouldn't be able to contain them." "Shut up. You have no right to speak here," Old Man Jiu roared. "You do it yourself yet won't allow others to speak. My dear father, the Jiu family will surely be ruined by you one day." With that, the man left with a mocking laugh. Upon closer inspection, the man actually walked with a noticeable limp. No one else present dared to make a sound. Old Master Jiu gasped for breath, unable to speak for a long while, clearly enraged beyond words. After all, this 5th master of the Jiu family was notoriously hot-tempered in his younger days. Later, old Jiu played the role of a matchbreaker, causing the death of 5th master's beloved, and from then on, father and son became enemies. 5th master's leg was broken back then while trying to save his beloved. Although Ji Woo's leg was broken, he could still walk quite fast. He caught up with Marcus, glanced at Lydia in his arms, then sighed and looked away. Finally, he patted Marcus on the shoulder and said, "Let me know if you need any help. Your fifth uncle may not have many talents, but his investigative skills are still somewhat decent." Marcus nodded, holding the person in his arms as he continued walking forward. Then got into the car. He remained completely silent, his face expressionless, yet strangely, it inexplicably gave off a sense of despair. Next came Lydia's funeral. Just as Daniel had said, Lydia was buried beside his daughter. However, the person buried was Marcus, and the tombstone was engraved with, "Beloved wife Lydia's grave." Daniel was so angry his face turned completely dark, but Marcus was indeed Lydia's nominal husband, so there was no way he could take her away. Marcus stared at the photo on the tombstone, still feeling an unreal sensation to this day. He had merely gone on a business trip, only to return and find his wife and children gone. He had already made up his mind before the business trip. Even though Lydia had once betrayed him, these 5 years had made her suffer enough. Her edges had been worn smooth, and with no support from the Shin family, from now on, he would be Lydia's only reliance. He would let bygones be bygones. As long as Lydia obediently stayed by his side, she would still be the glorious Mrs. Gu. But in the end, he was too arrogant. Before leaving the cemetery, Daniel coldly uttered just one sentence: "Marcus, your Gu family owes Lydia far too much." Daniel said no more after that. But it was clear he wouldn't let the matter rest. Yet, neither would Marcus. Now, his mind was filled with Lydia's final words, brimming with hatred. He couldn't bear to imagine, if everything Lydia said was true. If Emily was indeed harmed by the Gu family, how could he possibly face himself? Marcus didn't dare to think further, but before leaving the cemetery, he still made a promise. "Lydia, I will investigate thoroughly and give you an answer." Subsequently, Marcus ordered a full investigation into all matters related to Lydia and her daughter. At the same time, Daniel was also investigating. The Wei family caught wind of the situation. Rachel anxiously hid at home, discussing countermeasures with her father in the study. Father Wei was much more optimistic than Rachel. "Don't worry, since old Gu has already promised us, even if Marcus finds out, he can't blame us. When the time comes, we'll just say everything was arranged by old Gu." Rachel felt uneasy. "I have a bad feeling about this. Dad, maybe I should go abroad to lay low for a while. What's there to hide, as long as you protect this son and firmly claim to be his biological mother? No one would dare to touch you." But what if Marcus investigates what happened 5 years ago? Could he find out this child is also Lydia's? Father Wei waved his hand, a flash of cruelty identical to Rachel's crossing his eyes. "Don't worry. I've already taken care of the people who delivered Lydia's baby back then. They won't have a chance to talk." Only then did Rachel relax. "That's good." At that very moment, Rachel's phone rang abruptly, startling her out of her deep thoughts. Glancing at the number on her phone, a strong sense of disgust flashed in her eyes, but it was a call she couldn't avoid answering. As soon as the call connected, the threat came straight to the point. "Rachel, if you don't transfer the money to me soon, I'll go to Marcus and tell him that it was you who paid me to frame his wife." "Lydia, back then," Rachel's face darkened, "I just gave you 5 million, and now you're asking for more money. 5 million is nothing more than plucking a single hair for you. If I hadn't taken the risk to harm Lydia back then, she was the noble Mrs. Gu. What chance would you have had? It's up to you. If you don't give me the money, I'll just return to the country." Then the call was abruptly ended on the other end. After listening to Shin's father Wei, he said, "When cutting weeds, you must remove the roots. This is the consequence of your hesitation back then, allowing them to flee abroad. Leave this matter to me. Only the dead can never pose a threat." At the same time, far on the other side of the city, someone packed up their surveillance equipment, utterly shocked. After 5 years apart, Marcus finally returned to the marital home he once shared with Lydia. The villa was regularly cleaned, maintaining its former appearance as if the 5 years of Gu's absence had been just a dream. Marcus walked to the second floor and entered the bedroom, sitting down by the bed, by the window. The sheer curtains fluttered gently, Looking down from the window, one could still see clusters of well-tended white climbing roses. In the shade of the courtyard wall stood a rose trellis, beneath which hung a rocking chair. In a daze, he seemed to see that familiar figure lying there again, rocking gently while flipping through a book. Lydia. As the words fell, the illusion vanished. Marcus's expression darkened slightly, as an unfamiliar yet intense sense of loneliness overwhelmed him. He instinctively clenched his fist, but found only empty air in his grasp. Nothing at all. A sudden sharp pain pierced his heart. Marcus clutched his chest, groaning in pain. Even when his parents passed away when he was 10, he hadn't felt such torment. Was he wrong? Lydia, why would you rather die than be with me? Marcus closed his eyes, recalling the scene when they first got married. Back then, his grandfather had made him choose, eliminating the Wei family. He forcefully selected the Shin family. He knew Lydia would resist this marriage of convenience, but he believed she would eventually recognize his excellence and accept him. He knew she shared a deep bond with Daniel, and that he'd schemed to marry her. Hence, after marriage, he deliberately kept himself scarce, leaving early, returning late, to avoid being an eyesore in her presence. And just as he had expected, she spoke very little in front of him and rarely inquired about his private affairs, as if she had never regarded him as her husband, showing not a trace of possessiveness toward him. Yet time and again, he kept running into her with Daniel, shopping together, dining together, as if she had completely forgotten that he was her husband. So, he schemed to transfer Daniel abroad. Later, when she became pregnant, he thought their future was finally secure, but little did he expect that she would go on to do something even more outrageous. She said she needed investment for a project, and he gave her his full support, never imagining she would deal him a heavy blow. Without Daniel, she still wouldn't choose him. She conspired with another to abscond with the funds. Once she fled, the world would be vast. Where could he possibly find her? He could only make her bear the responsibility she deserved. Later, he had thought about letting her go, but as he watched his daughter grow up day by day, seeing her face become more and more like hers, he couldn't even treat his daughter normally. He couldn't deceive himself. He couldn't let go of Lydia. He had never imagined she would die. As night deepened, Marcus remained seated in the bedroom until a knock sounded at the door. "Morching, I have something here related to the Wei family. Would you like to see it?" The visitor was Ji Wu. Marcus's thoughts were pulled back. "No need, I'll investigate it myself. Are you sure you don't want to? The Wei family has done your wife no ordinary wrong." "Lydia," Marcus finally reacted, looking at Ji Wu, only to see Ji Wu toss a USB drive across the room. "Before you look at this, you'd better prepare yourself mentally." Marcus caught the USB drive without a word, his expression appearing deceptively calm. But Ji Wu knew that this was only how it appeared on the surface. He reminded him, "Morching, the Ji family owes the Shin family a great deal. What Lydia said before her death wasn't actually excessive." Marcus's eyes darkened as he suppressed the sudden unease rising in his heart, then stood up and went to the study. This night was destined to be an unsettled one. While everyone was sound asleep, police cars with blaring sirens sped towards the Wei residence, dragging Rachel from her dreams and taking her away. Meanwhile, Marcus appeared at a secluded sanatorium in Haicheng. However, when they arrived at the ward, the person inside had already vanished. Secretary Lin stepped forward to report, "President Ji, before your arrival, the old master sent someone to take the child away." Marcus's expression turned icy as he ordered, "Send all those involved in leaking the information to the police and charge them with commercial espionage." With that said, he walked out the door. Before getting into the car, an assistant surnamed Lee, who often accompanied Marcus, was forcibly pushed into the vehicle while pleading for mercy. "Mr. Ji, please spare me. I was just following the old master's orders. I had no choice." Marcus boarded the car without even glancing sideways, while Secretary Lin followed and reported, "Mr. Ji, we've identified the doctor who illegally performed the surgery on the young miss. That person had their medical license revoked years ago for malpractice." With every additional word spoken, Marcus's expression grew colder and more regretful. "Pursue legal action. Not a single one of them gets away with this." Secretary Lin hesitated. What about the old master? No need to consider him. Marcus closed his eyes, feeling a chill in his heart. He had known for a long time that his grandfather was stubborn and obstinate, seeing only profit and no family bonds. But he never expected his grandfather to be so heartless. As his thoughts surged, Lydia's desperate accusations seemed to echo in his ears once more. Marcus, Rachel, how cruel you are. To save your own son, you treated my daughter like a walking blood bank, draining her until she developed leukemia. And even then, you wouldn't let her go. You knew Emily had leukemia, yet you still extracted her stem cells, causing her to bleed to death. And now you dare to hold a banquet to celebrate. Do you truly fear no divine retribution? Emily loved you with all her heart, calling you dad and mom so sweetly. What kind of twisted emotions did you harbor to ignore her cries of pain again and again? Your son is precious. But isn't Emily my precious too? But the treasure I longed for, until death. I never got to hear her call me mom. So everything Lydia said was true, thinking of those files in the USB drive, remembering 5 years ago. What seemed like betrayal turned out to be a conspiracy specifically targeting her. Suddenly, a sharp pain pierced her heart again. He had assumed everything was under his control, only to realize that the person he cared about most had been suffering right under his nose. President GU, should we head back there next? After a moment of silence, Marcus finally replied, to the company. Back when the Wei family schemed against Lydia and plotted against him. This matter had to be settled once and for all. By the next day, news of the Wei family's troubles had already spread everywhere. Some shrewd individuals had already begun severing their cooperative ties with the Wei family, realizing something was wrong. Wei's father hurried to the Gu family's ancestral home to plead with the old master Gu, but before he could even meet the old master, Marcus personally announced the termination of all cooperative relations with the Wei family. As soon as the stock market opened in the morning, Wei Group's shares hit the limit down. The Wei family was in a state of utter chaos, while Rachel in the detention center was completely neglected. Not even a lawyer was assigned to her. It seemed she was about to be sentenced. At this moment, she was just like Lydia 5 years ago. With no one to help, she could only watch herself sink into the quagmire, never to emerge again. Old Gu managed to get to the nursing home and take the child before Marcus, clearly indicating that he had also guessed Marcus had discovered something. So, when the Wei family came looking for him, he took his people straight to the company to meet Marcus. Given the scale of Marcus's actions this time, Old Gu's visit to the Gu Corporation attracted significant attention. As everyone knew, Marcus had been raised by Old Gu himself. Although Marcus was known for being aloof and indifferent, he held great respect for Old Gu. Moreover, Mr. Gu's health has been poor in recent years, and he can't handle stress well. If Marcus were to compromise, the Wei family's crisis might just pass. However, the reality was, Mr. Wei was directly stopped by the secretary at the entrance of Gu Corporation. Mr. Wei, the CEO has given orders. Gu Corporation does not welcome anyone with the surname Wei. In front of the public, Mr. Wei was driven away like a beggar. He had never suffered such humiliation before, and the anger made his face turn red with rage. Elder Gu, I know there were misunderstandings between our Wei family and Morching before, but after all, I am of his father's generation. Don't you think Morching's actions are too much? Elder Gu lifted his eyes and glanced at Secretary Lin, who merely smiled respectfully without yielding an inch. Secretary Lin was Marcus's trusted aide, without Marcus's orders. He would never have dared to block someone like this. Grandfather Gu understood that this exposure had touched his grandson's bottom line. Marcus might appear calm and restrained, but in reality, he was incredibly stubborn. He then said, Wei Song, I'll go up and talk to him first. You wait in the car. Wei's father, seeking help, had no choice but to swallow his humiliation and force a smile. Then, sir, you go ahead with your business. After Grandfather Gu went upstairs, Wei Song returned to the car and immediately contacted his trusted aide. Check how much cash flow the company has left and transfer it all to my overseas account. Also, book me a flight abroad for tonight. After Elder Gu went upstairs, he was taken to Marcus's private lounge to wait. Whether intentionally or not, he unexpectedly saw the wedding photos of Marcus and Lydia in the meeting room. His face darkened on the spot. Who allowed you to display such an ill-omened thing here? Unexpectedly, as soon as he finished speaking, an even icier voice came from behind him. In my own room, is there any reason I can't display a photo of my wife and me? Elder Gu's expression changed abruptly. Then, he saw Marcus walk up to him. At this moment, Marcus's face showed a coldness never before directed at him, and there was not even the slightest trace of respect or the honorific address of grandfather. Old Gu's heart tightened. Realizing the situation was far more serious than he had imagined, yet, on the surface, he blustered with false bravado. Is this the attitude one should have toward an elder? But Marcus signaled Secretary Lin to step forward and place a document on the table, spreading it open. Only then did Marcus coldly retort, "And have you ever lived up to the title of elder, old Gu?" The term old Gu completely severed the relationship between Marcus and the old man. From that moment on, Marcus was no longer old Gu's grandson. Old Gu clutched his chest in anger and roared, "Marcus, don't forget who gave you everything. I can put you in the position of Gu Corporation's CEO, and I can just as easily pull you down." Marcus responded calmly and firmly, "Then go ahead and try, you." Old Gu was so furious he could barely breathe, and the butler hurriedly handed him an emergency pill. Then came a long silence. Old Gu couldn't respond because he knew that Marcus's achievements today were entirely due to his own efforts. It was only when Marcus took over that the Gu Group secured its position as the top company in Haicheng. Marcus could leave the Gu Group, but the Gu Group couldn't survive without Marcus. After recognizing the facts, old Gu had no choice but to soften his stance. "I know you can't accept what has happened during this period all at once, but it's already done. What exactly do you want to let it go and stop pursuing it further?" Marcus stared at the familiar yet strange old man before him and said in a tone that was sincere yet sarcastic, "I want Lydia. Can you give her back to me?" With this statement from Marcus, old Gu was left speechless. He truly couldn't understand how someone as emotionally detached as himself had raised such passionate individuals, one after another. The fifth son was like this, and Marcus remains the same. Ironically, they were the most outstanding individuals of their generation. The fifth son is already ruined. How could he bear to see the last hope of the Gu family fall as well? A man who doesn't prioritize his career, entangled by a woman. What future could he possibly have? The lounge fell into a prolonged silence. After a long pause, the old man finally managed to utter, "Is Lydia really that good? For the sake of a woman who betrayed you, you'd disregard the years of affection between us, grandfather and grandson, and declare war on me?" Marcus stared at old Master Gu for a few seconds, confirming there was no evasion in his eyes, only anger, before concluding that the Wei family had also kept secrets from old Master Gu, but on second thought, it made sense. If the Wei family had the audacity to detain that child, they certainly had the nerve to lie and claim the child was Rachel's. But thinking about the last conversation heard on the USB drive, Marcus asked with unprecedented seriousness and a cold tone, "Is Emily's illness congenital or not?" Gu Lai gripped his cane tightly, fully aware that this matter could no longer be concealed. Though the deed was done, when directly questioned by his grandson, he found himself unable to respond. After a long silence, he finally said, "Marcus, the person is already dead. What's the point of pursuing this now? If you truly cared so much about that deceased child, none of this would have happened." The tone, both callous and cruel, pierced Marcus's heart like needles. Watching the USB drive was one thing. Even knowing that the stem cell extraction had old Gu's tacit approval, hearing such indifferent acknowledgement still gave him an unbearable sense of his world collapsing. He recalled how Shou Jie had once whined to him, saying she was in pain. He thought it was just the ordinary discomfort of an four drip. Occasionally, he would carve out time to take her to the amusement park, and she would be so happy. So he never pressed further. He never expected that the child could endure pain even adults couldn't bear. Again and again, he was a complete failure as a father. After a long silence, Marcus let out a self-mocking laugh, his eyes filled with the devastation of a storm's aftermath. "It seems Lydia was right. People like us deserve to be left without descendants." With those words, Marcus turned and left without hesitation. Marcus never looked back. Secretary Lin timely reminded, "Mr. Gu, the Wei family's actions have concealed much from you as well. Please review these documents before making any decisions." Afterward, only old Master Gu and the butler remained in the meeting room. The butler hesitated, then asked in a low voice, "Old Master, would you like to review the documents now?" Old Gu snorted coldly. "What else, MPH? I'll see what nonsense that brat Marcus has cooked up for me." However, as soon as old Gu sat down, opened the file, and reached the second page, where he saw that both children were Lydia's, he nearly lost it. Outside the meeting room, Secretary Lin reported, "President, the ambulance has been arranged in advance. Would you like to go check?" However, Marcus merely replied indifferently, "No need. Don't inform me about matters related to that side anymore." With that, Marcus entered the meeting room. Secretary Lin sighed. The grandfather and grandson had completely fallen out. He suddenly remembered the curse Lydia uttered before her death. "I, Lydia, swear with my life to curse the Gu and Wei families to turn on each other and be left without descendants. I curse your evil deeds to be exposed to the world, and I curse you, Marcus, to lose your beloved forever and die alone." Now, the curse seems to be slowly coming true. Well, that's all for today's story. If you enjoyed this episode, remember to subscribe. We'll continue to update with more exciting stories, and we look forward to seeing you next time.